Welcome back to the second part of our deep dive into Reggae Boy's journey from 1998 to 2002. In our last video, we left off at the absolute low point with the 9-0 disaster against Costa Rica. But now it's time to flip the script and completely talk about our historic 1999 U17 Reggae Boys and the legendary World Cup journey. But to really understand how massive this run was, we need to add a little bit of historical context and see before this 1999 tournament, Jamaica had actually never made it to the final round of the Concacaf Youth Tournament. The absolute closest they ever got was back in 1988 and the 1991 edition of the tournament. Going into 1988, they were placed in Group B and missed out on advancing to the final stage by literally just 1 point behind Canada and Cuba. Jamaica had actually went completely undefeated in the group, but the tournament still felt like a massive disappointment because across 4 matches, Jamaica only managed to score a single goal. Their hyper defensive tactic completely backfired, especially in the frustrating match against El Salvador, who easily were the worst team in the entire group. If they had just opened up their tactics, things could have been different. Instead, Canada and Cuba cruised into their final stage, just needed a single win, where Canada got their only victory against Trinidad and Tobago, while Cuba got victories against Canada and Trinidad and Tobago, and both teams, along with the United States, clinched their ticket into the 1989 U16 Championship. By the way, this 1988 tournament was actually the last iteration played under the U16 banner before FIFA officially changed it over to the U17 tournament in 1991. Now, looking at these old tables, some of you might be wondering, where is Mexico? Well, if you don't know the story, just months prior to the U16 tournament, in April of 1988, a Mexican journalist uncovered a massive scandal. It turns out their football federation was caught using overage players in the U20 Concacaf tournament. The news became massive global uproar, resulting in FIFA giving Mexico a brutal 2-year ban from all international competitions. This would later be infamously known as the Caje Rule scandals. The single ban that Mexico had basically kicked them out of the 1980 Olympics, the 1989 U16 and U20 Championship, and ultimately kicked them out of the 1990 World Cup in Italy. This ban completely shifted the balance of power in CONCACAF. It heavily benefited the United States, who went on to compete in their first Senior World Cup in 40 years, while also being awarded Mexico's spot in the U20 World Cup. Costa Rica sneaked in their first ever Senior World Cup because of this regional State Cup. Cuba became the first ever Caribbean nation to compete in the Youth World competition, and Canada successfully qualified for their first U16 World Cup strictly on merit rather than getting in as a host. Now, if you thought the 1988 run was a close call, the 1991 could be classified as a heartbreak. This time around, Jamaica and Mexico were drawn into the exact same group. When the dust finally settled, Mexico only advanced to the final stage because they managed to only score just one more goal than Jamaica over the course of the first round. Going into the final match day, Jamaica was actually leading the entire group with just 3 points, while Mexico was sitting behind them with just 2 points. Remember, back then you could only get 2 points for a win. The Reggae Boys had a massive upper hand, but just like Honduras held Mexico to a 1-1 draw on match day 2, they came out to completely lock down Jamaica, dragging them into a frustrating 0-0 gridlock. Meanwhile, Mexico had the luxury of playing Guatemala on the final day, cruising to a comfortable 3-0 victory to steal the top spot. Mexico later topped the final round group and qualified for the U17 World Cup alongside USA and Cuba. Looking back at these razor-thin margins, it forced you to ask a couple massive questions. If Jamaica had qualified for those final rounds in 1988 or 1991 or both, would they have made it to the Youth World Cups? And if they did qualify, do you think that these early breakthrough would have helped us make an earlier push for the Senior World Cup in 1994? Personally, I think the early exposure and international scouting could have helped us and would have been the exact missing ingredient we needed for USA 94. Think about the domino effect here. Canada, the team who managed to edge past Jamaica and get the second place spot to go into the final round, ended up going all the way to the Intercontinental Playoffs for the 1994 World Cup, and they lost on penalties to Australia, who then went on to play Diego Maradona's Argentina for the final spot. Just imagine for a second if it had been Jamaica on the pitch against Argentina. With the early international exposure, let's say hypothetically we do end up going into the a penalty shootout with Australia, but let's say we end up being Australia. In this scenario, we could have, played against Argentina, but if we're going to be realistic with ourselves, Argentina would have absolutely embarrassed us tactically and mentally. Honestly, I would also say that Australia probably would have, beaten us too. But it was just a fun theory that I thought of during this research. Because knowing Jamaican football fans and our own players, everyone in the stadium probably would have been cheering and celebrating every single time Maradona touched the ball or scored if it had been us playing against Argentina instead of Australia. It would have been the exact same level of absolute fan hysteria we saw in Kingston when Lionel Messi came down to play against Cavaliers in 2025. But as wild as this alternate history sound, back in the real world of 1991, Jamaica was left empty-handed, and the Youth Foundation was failing to break through the senior roster and was entering a slump, and the entire island was starving for a savior. Which brings us right back into our main story to the dawn of 1999. Now, the 1999 tournament was structured a little differently. Concacaf had actually two host locations for that specific tournament. Jamaica hosted Group A, and El Salvador hosted Group B. Because we were the host, it meant this was Jamaica's first ever time automatically stepping into the final round of a U17 tournament. But the draw was brutal. We were lumped into a group alongside USA, Costa Rica, and Honduras. Going into the tournament, US was the favorite to top the group. They had a perfect history of never missing a single U17 World Cup, and they were literally the runner-ups in the last tournament. Costa Rica was expected to lock down the playoff spot because they had qualified for the last two straight World Cup and took third place in the previous CONCACAF cycle. Then you have Jamaica. Interestingly, from what I can gather, we didn't even participate in the 1996 edition. The most likely explanation is that the JFF was probably pouring 100% of their focus and cash into getting the senior reggae boys to the France 98, which to be fair completely paid off. Meanwhile, Honduras was in a similar boat to us. They had never made a single U17 World Cup and had gone completely winless back in the 1996 CONCACAF tournament. So when you look at our schedule, it was set up to be a perfect ascending order of how tough the opponents were. We had Honduras first, then Costa Rica second, and the USA to finish it off. On February 24th, 1999, the youth walked out in Montego Bay for the opening match against Honduras, and they dug deep, grinding out a massive 1-0 victory to grab the 3 points. But here's the mind-blowing part. As you remember from the last video, we talked about the 9-0 massacre. In case you remember, this exact same matchup happened on the exact same day. While the senior squad was suffering the most embarrassing defeat in our history, the youth were giving the country a reason to breathe. The local media instantly pivoted and they completely buried the senior boys' disaster and put every single ounce of their focus and optimism onto the U17 national team. Going into the second match day, Jamaica was sitting comfortably at the top of the table because while we were beating Honduras, the USA and Costa Rica had fought out a wild 2-2 draw in their opening game. On February 26, Jamaica stepped back onto the pitch to face Costa Rica, and the youth went out and got a massive statement-making 2-0 victory. You could say they completely avenged the senior team's 9-0 disaster from 2 days prior. Meanwhile, the USA defeated Honduras with a 3-0 scoreline. And get this meant going into the final match day, Jamaica was mathematically guaranteed at least a playoff spot for the U17 World Cup, and the senior boys' 9-0 loss has officially become an afterthought. The entire country completely stopped talking about it because all the focus was now on Jamaica potentially qualifying for our first ever Youth World Cup. To guarantee automatic and direct qualification without dealing with a playoff, Jamaica just needed to grind out at least 1 point against the group favorites, the United States, and the youth did exactly that. On February 28, 1999, the match ended in a 0-0 draw. The Jamaica U17 team had officially qualified for their first ever Youth World Cup, making history as the first English-speaking Caribbean team to ever qualify for the U17 tournament. Now I know some of you guys are probably wondering who actually scored in these games. But just like with the footage, I sadly couldn't find any official archival information regarding individual scores of any of the teams during this final round. However, soccer historians over at the RSSF fully confirmed the match results, and CONCACAF confirmed Jamaica's qualification alongside Mexico for the main rounds in the U17 World Cups in 1999. Think about the timeline here. Just 4 days after the senior Reggae Boys suffered the biggest defeat in history, this U17 qualification completely overshadowed the disaster. Because between the historic France 1998 run and now this 1999 U17 World Cup breakthrough, the future and optimism for Jamaican football was at an absolute high, and the JFF's standing with the local Jamaican fans was easily the highest it has ever been. Now, following the historic qualification in Montego Bay, trying to track down any friendlies was, difficult to find, right? Because I wanted to see if the Reggae Boys did any friendlies to prepare for the tournament in New Zealand. And all the information I was able to find were groups of friendlies that happened in USA, El Salvador, and Brazil. But those friendlies actually took place before the Concacaf qualifiers. And also, there was no information on what the score for those matches were, on whether we win, lost, or draw. But as the team packed their bags, of course, to the tournament in November of 1999, the JFA executive actually decided to replace Dean Witherly and Jackie Walters from their head coaching role because they believed they had done their job, and decided to fly in Brazilian coach Clovis de Oliveira to lead the team for the final part of the U17 Boys World Cup journey. Now, a quick correction. While I was editing this video, I actually managed to track down some crucial information about the friendlies after the qualification tournament. So thanks to Simon Preston at reggaeboys.com, I found out in April 1999 the young boys traveled to a Four Nations tournament against USA, Mexico, and Morocco. It was a tough reality check for the youth. While they lost 1-0 to USA, got dismantled 5-0 to Mexico, and lost 1-0 to Morocco, finishing bottom of the standing. So my apologies for missing this earlier, but it goes to show you how heavy international preparation they were trying to pack in. So now let's go back into the main video. When you analyze the 18-man squad that Oliveira selected, or most likely the JFF, the roots of the team were deeply tied to local schoolboy football. 8 of the 18 players came from Kingston-based teams, with Real Molin FC dominating the club numbers with 5 players. But the real powerhouse of this roster was a single high school, Clarendon College. They completely dominated the squad, sending a staggering 6 players to the World Cup. And these players were Shane Stevens, Lauren Salesman, Anthony Bennett, Alan Whitaker, Dane Chambers, and Sean Fraser. The team also featured Carville Stewart, who was officially registered to Real Molin FC, but was playing for Hotchkiss High School in the United States. Through my research, it shows that he was originally a Jamaica college player before moving to the States. And the undisputed star of the entire generation were widely regarded as Wilmer standout Keith Kelly, Clarendon College attacking threat Sean Fraser, and the brickwall goalkeeper of Clarendon College, Alan Whitaker. In total, the squad featured 11 DaCosta Cup players, 6 Manning Cup players, and 1 American high school player. And this schoolboy split actually led to a massive piece of local football drama on the island. Get this, literally one day before Jamaica's opening match against Burkina Faso, Stets had actually played Clarendon College in the Costa Cup semifinals. And because the 6 stars of this Clarendon College players were all on the plane to New Zealand representing the U17 team, a heavily depleted Clarendon College side lost the match to Stets, and Stets ultimately went on to win the Costa Cup final that year. And you can honestly say that Stets only won the biggest rural tournament in Jamaica strictly because the Clarendon College entire core was gone. And I don't want to really start any beef in the comments, but the facts and evidence clearly shows that Stets benefited from this. But back on the global stage, the time for schoolboy football was over, and Clovis de Oliveira and his young ballers had finally landed in New Zealand, and it was time to show the world what Jamaican youth footballers can do. On November 12, 1999, the Jamaica U17 team made their historic World Cup debut in rainy, wet conditions against African debutants Burkina Faso. Prior to kickoff, a major selection crisis was averted when the Jamaican delegation successfully overturned a suspension for captain and Women's defender Alex Thomas, who was originally deemed eligible due to card accumulation from the Concacaf qualifiers. Manager Clovis de Oliveira deployed a defensive 5-4-1 formation, with Alan Whitaker in goal, a back five of Lawrence Salesman, Shane Stevens, Alex Thomas, Carville Stewart, and Kevin King. A midfield consisting of Ishaya Bryan, Sean Fraser, Keith Kelly, and Anthony Bennett, with Dwayne Richards acting as lone striker. The match was decided early in the 12th minute when Burkina Faso's Dribble struck a shot that Whitaker unfortunately pushed into his own net. Reports from the tournament noted that Burkina Faso physically dominated the slick, muddy pitch throughout the match, neutralizing Jamaica's technical threats and making it difficult for the young boys to rescue 8 points. On to match day 2 on the 14th of November, where Jamaica had to face a relentless Paraguay side. Honestly, this was a complete reality check. Paraguay came out firing on all cylinders, went up 4-0 against Jamaica in a devastating first half. The bleeding was so bad that at halftime, De Oliveira pulled Alan Whitaker from goal and brought on backup goalkeeper Keith Wilson to try and steady the ship. But the onslaught didn't stop there. Paraguay won a penalty in the second half, with Alejandro da Silva capping off a brilliant night by securing his brace to bring the final scoreline to a crushing 5-0 defeat. With two straight losses, the youth are officially out of the tournament and the dream was over, leaving the young boys with just one final match against Qatar to play for their own pride. On the final match day, on the 17th of November, Jamaica played their closing group fixture against Qatar. According to the official delegation reports by FIFA, Qatar simply controlled the flow of the game for the first half, keeping the Reggae boys pinned back. But when the second half started, they became absolutely clinical, hammering in 4 goals in just one half. Their star's top scorer, Walid Hamza, put on an absolute clinic, bagging in a brace to notch his fourth and final goal of the tournament to lock in a 4-0 defeat. With that final whistle, Jamaica officially finished in dead last in Group D, going completely goalless across all 3 matches and conceded 10 goals. Paraguay topped our group with 7 points, while Qatar finished right behind them in second with 6 points. And for those of you who are interested in the rest of the tournament, the grand finale came down to Group C winners Australia and runner-ups Brazil. After a grueling 120 minutes of completely scoreless contest, Brazil ultimately edged out, winning a wild 8-7 penalty shootout to lift the U17 trophy. Now, ultimately, what on earth happened to the generation once they landed in New Zealand? To answer that, we have to look directly at the FIFA official delegation report. Remember that correction I made earlier about our friendlies? Well, according to the official FIFA reports, a lack of match preparation was absolutely not the issue. On top of the 4 nation tournament in April, the JFF actually sent the U17 squad on a massive 11-match developmental tour across Brazil from July to August. And right after that, they also lost 4-0 to USA in a September friendly. So, if they were playing matches, why did they collapse? If you look closely at the final tournament standing, you notice a bizarre trend. Only 2 teams in the entire tournament finished dead last in their own groups while conceding double-digit goals, and the 2 teams were Thailand and Jamaica. And FIFA report explicitly pointed out the connection. It stated that both Jamaica and Thailand were the only nations completely reliant on a localized high school system for their player selection, while every other country on earth was using professional club academies or elite residency programs to develop their youth. Jamaica was essentially trying to compete on the world stage using schoolboy football infrastructure. Now we look at one of the teams that we tied in the qualifiers, United States. In the months leading up to the World Cup, the U.S. completely evolved. They utilized their Olympic developmental program to scout a massive pool of 60 players, placing them directly into the Bradenton IMG Residency Academy. They didn't just focus on raw skill, they drilled tactical versatility and elite physical fitness. The final FIFA report heavily praised the USA for the ability to tactically adapt mid-game when facing adversity, smoothly shifting from a 3-5-2 formation to a 3-4-1-2 and an aggressive 3-4-3 formation. That residency structure later produced tournaments Golden Ball winner, some guy named Landon Donovan, and the Silver Ball winner, DeMarcus Beasley. Jamaica, on the other hand, went about things completely backwards. The JFF scouted 70 players over a 2-year process through the high school, Mining Cup, and the Costa Cup system, selecting them almost entirely based on their raw individual technical ability. They cut the pool down to 30 players right before the Concacaf tournament, and then for the tournament they had 18 players, barely making any structural change before flying to New Zealand. While the FIFA reports did see glimpses of hope from standout individuals like Sean Fraser and Dwayne Richards, it heavily criticized Jamaica for a complete lack of creativity, mobility, and physical fitness required to survive at this level. The report noted a constant painful theme that the young boys were stuck playing catch-up football across all three matches. FIFA openly praised our individual technique, but the core of Captain Horace Burrell, Clovis de Oliveira, Dean Witherley, and Jackie Walters completely failed to prepare these boys in tactical understanding, adaptability, and basic physical conditioning. The JFF should have used this tournament as a wake-up call to follow the United States blueprints of building a year-round residency or proper club academy system, but they didn't. Instead, they went straight back to business as usual. It would take Jamaica until 2011 and eventually 2026 to even make another U17 World Cup tournament, and even after the 2026 qualification, proper club and residency system on the island are still barely noticeable. This toxic over-reliance on schoolboy talent has severely held back football in Jamaica for over 20 plus years, impacting our youth teams, our local leagues, and even the senior national squad. And listen, even though the senior reggae girls have made us proud by reaching back-to-back World Cups, that success has completely nothing to do with the work of our federation. If anything, our young reggae girls have suffered far worse than the boys. High school football for girls is only available noticeably at the U19 level, meaning that the younger development is completely ignored. To make matters worse, the local club systems doesn't even have a proper infrastructure from regional confederations like CASAFA. Instead, the entire youth girls club circuit is completely reliant on private groups like Rainiers Academies hosting local tournaments just to keep the sport alive for young girls. The 1999 U17 World Cup was a massive warning sign for the future of Jamaican football, but the federation chose to ignore it, completely burying the lesson learned in New Zealand. So, where do we go from here? Over the next three videos, we're shifting the focus back to the big stage. First, we're diving straight into the 2000 Gold Cup and the chaotic second round qualification for Jamaica, along with any noticeable friendlies I can track down. From there, we'll move on to the legendary 2001 U20 team before wrapping up the entire saga with a high-stake final round of World Cup qualification. Now, behind the scenes, I'm actually working on all three videos at the same time to try and get them out to you guys over the next week. I should mostly be able to finish the 2000 Gold Cup and the second round qualifiers by this Thursday. The other two might face a slight delay since I'll be away for some time after that. But if I do manage to finish them early, I'll schedule the posts to drop consistently over the next week or so. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the rollout, and drop a comment below on what you think of the 1999 team and if any of you guys remember any reports about the squad. And also, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next chapter of this video.